Welcome to a Legalbytes presentation of the Karen Reed murder trial. If you're new here, my name is Alita. I'm a lawyer licensed in California and DC, and on this channel we make sense of the law one bite at a time. If you want more on the background of the Karen Reed case, check out our video on it linked in the description below. But otherwise, you be the jury. Did Karen Reed murder her Boston PD boyfriend John O'Keefe, or is she being framed by local police who Reed says are actually responsible for O'Keefe's death? Tell us what you think. But in the process, the one rule is don't be a dingus. Remember, everyone comes from their own perspective and opinion, and everyone comes to conclusions at their own pace. Agree or disagree, but always respectfully. Okay, let's get into it. All right, folks, we are back for the afternoon session. We are a little bit late, but we're gonna get through it all just the same. We're gonna go through. We'll zip on through sidebars and all kinds of stuff like that. So we'll be just fine. Really quick, the poll this morning. I totally forgot to end it before ending it, but I mentioned it in the chat. I'm going to mention it here. Going into day 23, how do you lean regarding Karen Reed's murder charge? It was 2,000 people that voted in the poll. 87% said not guilty. 9% said need more information. 3% said guilty. So interesting. There has been a shift for some people, particularly away from need more information to not guilty. Very interesting to see that. Also, Chris Martin, thank you so much for the super sticker. Very, very kind and generous of you. And also, wait a minute. Somebody joined Bike Club on the way in as well. I don't know why this didn't get picked up by StreamYard. Sarah Beth, thank you so much for becoming a YouTube member. Welcome to Bike Club. So happy to have you here. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Really, really appreciate it. And there was one question here before, which I will answer before we get started. Daniel Nagy, Legalbytes, what about the what if any lally tally? Sounds kind of rhythmic as I say it in my head. Maybe I've missed it from the beginning. You know, I did not mention it actually this morning. Give me 1 second here and I will find it for you. The lally tally. So the total after day 21 was 1,452. Day 22 had 84 what if any's. And the total so far going into day 23, so before this morning, was 1,536. I have a feeling we're going to be able to break 2,000 here in this case. Crazy. Okay, let's jump right on into it, folks. We've got so much more to get through today.
All right, Mr. Jackson, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Triple Proctor, before we wrote, we were discussing Sallyport video that you watched several weeks ago. I want to make sure I'm clear about this. You indicated that the video that you watched was proper in terms of orientation, but the timestamp on the bottom had been inverted, correct?
Yes, that's the way it appeared.
And you recall that being a yellow chyron underneath.
To the best of,
in other words, the font color.
to the best of my memory, yes.
Which of the Canton Police Department videos were you responsible for retrieving, if any?
I did not retrieve any of them.
So what I'm trying to ask is, and maybe I'm doing it inartfully, how did those Sallyport videos end up in the possession of the Commonwealth? What was the line of succession?
Detective Lieutenant Tully retrieved the Sallyport videos, I believe.
And do you know from whom he retrieved those Sallyport videos?
I believe it was the chief of police.
Oh.
Chief Rafferty specifically gave him whatever videos were provided.
Correct. That's my understanding.
And then he provided those to you for your review.
Yes.
Jude McGuy, thank you so much for the super chat. Proctor was so sure of his conclusion 16 hours in that he can continue to investigate the issue for 18 months, right? Right. He continued to interview people for the first time 18 months later. Insane. And absolutely insane.
I want to stay on the subject of videos for a second, but shift gears to the Ring video footage. You've already testified that there were several hundred Ring videos from One Meadows, from both the facing the driveway and the front door camera, correct?
Yes.
As the case officer, you obtained and controlled those ring videos from One Meadows from the moment that they came into Massachusetts State Police custody until they were handed over to the Commonwealth, correct?
Yes, they were archived.
You drafted the search warrant for the ring video access records, correct?
I did.
You obtained the warrant returns once those search warrants were executed, correct?
I did.
You took possession of Mr. O'Keefe's cell phone
Sorry about that.
physically, correct?
Yes.
And you had access to Mr. O'Keefe's ring account in that cell phone, is that right?
Correct.
You indicated that you reviewed several of the videos on his ring app on his cell phone, is that right?
Yes.
So you obviously had not only possession of his cell phone, you had possession of his login account information to get into the app on his cell phone. Is that right?
I don't believe we had the password. We had his email account associated with the ring.
Which means
Yeah.
some
So
way
you-
or another, you could get access to the ring videos
Correct.
and watch those ring videos on his app on the phone,
Yes.
which means you
Christopher Lambert, really quick. Thanks so much for the super chat. Yikes, I forgot to hit the like. Did you remember? Yes, if you are enjoying the coverage, please do like the video. Absolutely. Really, really helpful. So thank you so much for the reminder, Christopher, and also for the super chat.
had full access to the app. You could keep videos, you could save for later, you could delete videos, you could do anything you wanted to within that app, correct?
Yes, those are the capabilities within that app.
Trooper Proctor, did you delete any of the ring videos ever from John O'Keefe's phone?
Absolutely not.
Did you delete a video of Miss Reed arriving to One Meadows at approximately 12:41 a.m. on January 29th, 2022?
Absolutely not.
You will agree, Trooper Proctor, that the video of Miss Reed returning home from 34 Fairview at approximately 12:41 a.m. is not there.
Correct.
As the case officer, you're aware that Trooper DeChico also reviewed some or all of those videos, correct?
Yes.
And he did that at your request.
Correct.
He took notes of his review of those videos, correct?
Yes.
And then he provided those notes to you so that you could then memorialize those notes and your notes in a broader report that you then drafted in November of 2022, correct?
From memory serves me, the report I wrote regarding the ring camera was based off my observations of the videos that I had watched.
But you certainly did have, as you just indicated, you did accumulate his notes and review his notes as well as your own notes, correct?
Best of my recollection, I wrote that report off of my notes.
Did you actually, at any point before writing your report, did you note or did you review his notes?
I can't recall.
You asked him, he reviewed the videos at your directions, correct? At
Yes.
your direction, correct?
Yes.
And obviously he would have wanted to provide you whatever insights he had into his review of those videos. Otherwise, what's the point, right?
Correct.
So when you reviewed his notes, did you see that they were on some sticky pads? You remember that?
That sounds about right.
Yeah, anytime he says
Do you
absolutely
recall
not.
exactly, as you sit here,
that
exactly
I
what
believe
was
it.
on one or more of those sticky pads that you reviewed from Trooper DeChico?
I don't know.
Would it refresh your recollection if you would take a look at a copy of those notes?
Yes.
May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
Okay.
At the top,
Yes.
if you would mind taking a look at the top or the uppermost top note that's highlighted with a sticky note next to it.
I'm going to fast forward through his review.
Trooper Proctor, do you have these notes in mind, specifically the uppermost note?
The 0041?
Correct.
Yes.
All right. You reviewed this previously before you wrote your report, correct?
Yes.
All right. And you note that at 0041, which is a time relative to what DeChico was looking at on the ring video, he indicated taillights from driveway, parentheses, I think she arrived home, in parentheses, correct?
Correct.
0041 is what? Is that in reference to?
Just after midnight, the approximate time where Miss Reed will be returning from Fairview Road.
It's military time for 12:41 a.m., correct?
Yes.
You wrote a report on November, I'm sorry, I earlier said November, it's actually June 1, 2022, memorializing the times that were of note to you in that ring footage, correct?
Yes.
Do you recall every single entry that you made concerning the events that were of note to you that were reflected in your report?
The majority of them. Not every single one.
Would it refresh your recollection to look at a copy of your report to determine what all you did and did not note?
Yes, sir.
May I approach?
Sure. Do you have it with you, Trooper? Do you have your report with you?
Yeah, so if there's a note about seeing her come home at 0041, that means at 12:41 a.m. there was some kind of a video that was reviewed that showed that she came home at that hour, and now we don't know.
I'd ask you to review that report, especially as to page 2 and 3.
And now we don't know what happened to that video. The prosecution is trying to say that Karen Reed deleted that, but as came back from the Ring Corporation, there was no activity log showing that anybody else had entered into this system. He had access to it, though. Do we trust that he didn't go in and delete it? It seems outrageous at the beginning of this trial to say that the lead investigator would do something like that. But now, at this
May I
point,
approach? Yes. Thank you.
does it seem that ridiculous? Does it seem outrageous?
Trooper, do you have those events in mind?
I do.
Your report is dated June 1st, 2022, correct?
Correct.
And reflected in this report are the bullet points of the times that you found of some note in your review of all of the ring footage from One Meadows, correct?
Yes.
In your report, there is no mention of the footage showing Karen Reed arriving home at 12:41 a.m., correct?
Correct.
And that's notwithstanding the fact that in Trooper DeChico's report, in his handwritten notes, he makes note of an event at 12:41 a.m. indicating, I think she arrived home, correct?
Correct.
So sometime between when Trooper DeChico wrote his notes and when you wrote your report, that video footage vanished, correct?
There's also no date on Trooper DeChico's notes. We have many dates from Ring video, so I don't know if he's referencing a different date.
Well, you're aware that the video footage from 12:41 a.m. is gone, correct?
Yes, it's something I've tried to find through Ring for months, as well as the video when Miss Roberts, Miss McCabe, Miss Reed arrived back at John's and they're looking at the broken taillight. That video is gone as well.
So
I'm trying to be like, well, but there's no date on Trooper DeChico's notes here about 12:41 a.m. What other day is anybody looking at 12:41 a.m.? Like, what other date? What other date of surveillance? What are they looking at for Karen Reed on? You know what I mean? Like that's such a dumb response. That is a dumb response.
at some point, while this footage was in Massachusetts State Police custody and being reviewed by Trooper DeChico, that video existed, didn't it?
Objection.
The objection is sustained. Mr. Jackson, don't waive that again, okay?
Yes, Your Honor. fact is, notwithstanding Trooper DeChico's handwritten notes, there's no video of 1241 on January 29th, is there?
No, there isn't.
Trooper Proctor, would you agree that from the very beginning of your investigation, you treated Karen Reed very differently than you treated the Alberts and the McCabe's in this case?
Objection.
I'll allow it. Was she treated differently?
Absolutely not. Like I've said before, we followed the facts and the evidence, an open mind.
Did you consider her to be
Really? Let's see the text messages with you talking about all the other people. Does it really reflect that you treated her the same way that you treated them? Please.
for want of a better phrase, an outsider,
No, not at all.
Are there
not
text
somebody from
messages?
Canton,
No, not at all.
not family, not friends with the Alberts?
Absolutely not.
At some point, your view of this case caused you to turn what could be described as a bias into an out-and-out hatred. Would you agree with that?
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you develop some sort of hatred for Miss Reed at
Objection.
any point in your investigation?
I'll allow it.
Again, we followed the facts and evidence which showed Miss Reed
That's not answering the question.
hit Mr. O'Keefe with her vehicle. And yes, at times I got emotional because of that. And I said some stuff, texted some things I shouldn't have, but it was based off the evidence.
As a matter of fact, you did express your feelings about Miss Reed in yet another text message that we haven't gone over yet today. Is that right? On February 4th, 2022? Might as well turn to tab 10.
Tab 10?
It's either the bait stamp or the,
This is your triple F, this is Foxtrot. And the base stamp is 2526.
Yes, sir.
Do you see an entry from Courtney Proctor, a text starting, "I didn't give my"?
Yes.
Request permission to publish, Your Honor?
yes.
2526, Mr. Bates.
What is
On that date, February 4th, 2022, your sister texted in relation to some sort of donation that she had given. "I didn't give my name as I didn't want anyone to link me to Michael," meaning you, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. May we approach?
Okay, take that down.
donation to what? You surreptitiously giving a donation to whom? You don't want to be linked to who? We are going to fast forward through this sidebar.
Your Honor?
Yes.
You see the text from Courtney Proctor, "I did not give my name as I didn't want anyone to link me."
So that's stricken. That's what was objected to, just this one, or the whole page goes in.
You responded to a text message from your sister, correct? And your response was, "Hopefully she kills herself," correct?
Yes.
Who's she?
The defendant.
Miss Reed?
Correct.
You literally said that you hope that Karen Reed, the subject of your investigation, the woman sitting to my left, about 7 feet from me, that she would just die, correct?
The figure of speech.
You wanted her to, the figure of speech is you wanted her to kill herself,
No.
right?
No, it's not.
Trooper Proctor, Karen Reed, in your investigation, had quickly become a very serious problem for you, hadn't she?
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you believe that Karen Reed was a problem or an issue for your investigation?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
No, absolutely not.
In your words, quote, "All the powers that be want answers ASAP." That's what you texted on January 29th, right?
Yes.
That put a lot of pressure on you, didn't it, Trooper Proctor?
There's a lot of pressure in every case, sir.
This case involves a Boston cop whose family you were actually connected to, correct?
Loosely.
Loosely.
Chris L, loosely.
Yes.
Julie L, loosely.
0.3 to
Yes.
1.
Colin Albert, loosely.
Yes.
Kevin Albert.
Kevin Albert,
Loosely.
Yes.
Loose enough to leave his badge and his gun in your cruiser after a night of drinking, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
That is pretty loose. I'm not going to lie.
You agreed in your group chat that you needed to, quote, make this cut and dry because another cop was involved. Those are your words, right?
Objection.
Where is this?
This was referred to in earlier text messages, group chats this morning.
So is that right? Did you say that, sir?
I did text that. I don't know if it's in the exact context. But yes, those were my words.
Group chat.
Yes, that was in the group chat.
Your friends wrote this whole thing, in their words, stinks, correct?
Yes, I interpret that as a joke.
You believed, Trooper Proctor, that your life would be much easier if Karen Reed was just dead, didn't you?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
No. Like I had said, it was a figure of speech. My emotions got the best of me based on, the fact that Miss Reed hit Mr. O'Keefe with her vehicle and left him to die on the side of the road. So my emotions got the best of me with that figure of speech.
Well, let's talk about your figures of speech. During the course of your investigation, your figures of speech include the following. She's a bitch.
Objection.
Is that right?
Yes.
A whack job, correct?
Yes.
A retard, right?
Yes.
Her balloon knot leaks, right?
Yes.
No ass, correct?
Yes.
She's fucked, according to you, right?
Yes.
Ass leaker. That was the word you used, a figure of speech, right?
Correct.
A girl who shits herself, right?
Correct.
And then fuck her, correct?
Correct.
Would you agree, Trooper Proctor, that you have dehumanized Karen Reed during the course of your investigation with comments and words like this?
Objection.
I'll give you this one, Mr. Jackson.
Would you agree with that?
I would say based off that language,
The only answer is yes.
yes.
There you
And
go.
you admitted, in your own words, that the cop homeowner wasn't going to, quote, catch any shit,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Correct.
Because you were out to quote, make this cut and dry. Isn't that right?
The homeowner wasn't going to catch any shit because Mr. Albert had nothing to do with Mr. O'Keefe's
That's
death.
not what
Because you were going to make sure that the case was cut and dry. Those were your words, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
And Trooper Proctor, it would be far easier for you to pin it on the girl who's just a whack job cunt, in your words, who you hope just kills herself, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
Shame on you, sir.
Objection.
All right, so jurors, disregard that. I've told you before, lawyers can't make comments. They can ask questions. And Mr. Jackson, you know better than
I
that.
understand. That's all I have.
Mr. Lally?
Mr. Lally is going to try to redirect. He's going to try to polish a turd here, a turd that's on fire, and it's about the size of a dinosaur turd. There's no way. And all he's got is a broom. Like, there's no way. There's no way to successfully redirect this. What you just saw at the last 5 or 10 minutes of this cross-examination, this was like a fireworks show, where you've got a really good, like, if you've seen like really good fireworks shows, like at Disneyland or Disney World, like they really know how to put on a good fireworks show, where you've got, the show's going, you've got this firework and that firework and that firework, and then you've got the grand finale where they just throw everything up together and it's a spectacular display. That's what this was right here. At the very end, this was the grand finale of this cross-examination. Mic drop. with a sustained objection, but whatever. Does anybody really care about his commentary at the end? Yes, it's improper. Yes, but I mean, he's saying what so many people are thinking and feeling. So this is just fantastic cross-examination by Alan Jackson. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Tish with a question earlier. Can you, if you have time and energy, look up some of the jury reactions till next stream? I need to know if this even bites on them. So apparently from I saw from Monday, they apparently were really, really reacting to it and not in a good way to the prosecution. So that is what happened then. I would love to hear more reactions for for today. I don't know. We'll find out. I'll definitely try to find it if I can. Just because, have you ever seen Dogma? Proctor is the Golgothan, just a poop monster. Dogma, I have seen a long, long, long time ago. I don't really remember all of that much. I'm pretty sure isn't that the one where Alanis Morissette plays God, and like doesn't talk? I can't remember. But that's like part of the Jay and Silent Bob series, right? Am I thinking of the right movie? Anyhow, so yes, fantastic, absolutely fantastic cross-examination. 2 thumbs up for Alan Jackson. And I guess my computer's no longer doing the video animations, which is a bummer. Okay. All right. All right. Let's continue to direct examination now.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, redirect.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
All right. How can you possibly polish this turd?
Now, when you had started with cross-examination the other day, you were asked some questions about whether or not in August of 2022, you disliked or did not like Mr. Yannetti, correct?
That's correct.
Why was that?
Well, basically, he stood up in open court and spouted lie after lie about me, called me corrupt and conflicted, dragged my name through the mud after I spent 10 plus years without a single complaint filed against me, and he had no basis or no facts for these wild accusations because there are none. This investigation was done with the utmost integrity, not just by me, but my supervisors and other troopers in my office, as well as Mr. Yannetti shows up at my sister's school yesterday in the parking lot where he's not welcomed or where people are not supposed to be, with one of their witnesses and their private investigator. And a teacher sees this, informs Mr. Yannetti that he can't be there, and instead of saying okay and leaving, he asks, is Courtney Proctor in the building? Does she work here? She calls me to see if she was being served.
Objection. Can we approach?
Yes.
Yeah, what is happening? What? Yannetti showing up at his sister's place of work, which is a school, to harass her or something yesterday on a day off of court? Like, what? But also everything that he said before about like, oh, he's dragging my name in the mud. None of this is true. And the investigation was good and blah, 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 blah. Does the jury really believe that? I really, really want to see the jury's reactions right now. I would love to be looking at the jury right now so that they can just look at him and be like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Nothing that you're saying is real or accurate. Like, I have made my own conclusions about you and about your investigation, and none of it reflects the stuff that you are saying right now. The words that are coming out of your mouth are not real. Okay, we're going to fast forward here. Oh, the jury's going out. They are taking a break for the sidebar. I guess it's an extended sidebar. So, yeah, I don't know how the door would have been possibly opened for him to be able to talk about all of this other stuff. Is the jury back? I don't think so.
Are unmuted.
Okay, jury's coming back.
Thank you. Maybe seated. Close back in session.
Witness 2, please.
Now the witness.
I am striking that.
Okay. Yes, I hope so.
Jurors, I am striking that last answer. It was probably a partial answer cut off. I'm striking it completely, disregarded. If you took notes, cross the notes out. You're not to consider it in any way. It is completely stricken from the record.
Yes. Yes. What in the hell was
Trooper,
that?
I
No. Why did you put us on oh, come on now. We've got to go back. Okay. Come on. Okay. I hate it when YouTube does this to me. When it puts us on live when we shouldn't be live yet. Okay, I think we're here. Yes.
I am striking that last answer. It was probably a partial answer cut off. I'm striking it completely, disregarded. If you took notes, cross the notes out. You're not to consider it in any way. It is completely stricken from the record. And Trooper, I'd suggest you listen to the question being asked of you before you answer it.
My apologies, Your Honor.
Keep your voice up, Mr. Lally.
Trooper Proctor, let me try that again. As far as you were asked about text messages that occurred in August of 2022 in which you indicated that you did not like Mr. Yannette, correct?
Correct.
And so at the time of that text message, it was sent in August of 2022. Why was that?
In August of 2022. Why was that?
Yes.
The reasons I laid out, the false accusations of being conflicted and corrupt spouted in an open court, which there's zero evidence of. Like I said, I stand by the integrity of this investigation, as well as every trooper and supervisor in my office.
Were there also motions filed by Mr. Yannetti or by counsel containing photographs of yourself and some children?
Yes.
And what, if anything, were the allegations in regard to the children that were depicted in those photographs?
So the photograph was taken in my parents' backyard.
Objections overruled.
My parents' backyard at a pool party. There's some little kids in the photo. Defense counsel kept insinuating that those were the McCabe's children, when in fact they were my family, my cousins.
Have you at any point in time ever met any children of the McCabe's?
No, sir.
In the course of this investigation, as it was sort of alleged on cross-examination, did you essentially pick a suspect and then try to have the evidence fit that?
Objection. The form, leading.
In that form, it's stricken. Not allowed to ask it that way, Mr. Lally.
How did you conduct this investigation, you and the other troopers in your office?
From the start of this investigation with an open mind, like I said earlier, we didn't know what we had, possible medical. So as the day went on and we collected more evidence and developed compelling evidence against Ms. Reed.
Now, with reference to this investigation, it continued after January 29th, 2022, when you had those text communications with your friends, correct?
Yes.
Was there additional information that you compiled over the course of that investigation following January 29th, 2022?
I'm sorry, say that again, please.
Following that date of those text messages on January 29th,
Yes.
2022, Was there additional information that was gathered over the course of your investigation by yourself or other troopers involved in the investigation?
Yes.
And from that additional information that was gathered, what, if any, information that was gathered throughout the course of the investigation indicated that anyone besides Miss Reed had anything to do with Mr. O'Keefe's death?
All the information gathered after that date indicated no one else was responsible for Mr. O'Keefe's death.
Of course it did.
Sir, you were asked some
You ignored the other stuff.
questions on cross-examination about testimony in a prior proceeding and shown specifically at page 01563, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Sir, I'm giving you 01562, 63, and 64, and ask you to read those and look up.
What were the numbers again, Mr. Lally?
1562, 63, and 64, I believe.
Fast forwarding while he reviews.
Now, Trooper, after reviewing those 3 pages, is there now more context to what you were just asked about on one specific page of that testimony?
Yes.
And those were questions related to what you had told and what you had informed other people within the office or your supervisors in relation to relationships with both McCabe's and the Albers, correct?
Correct.
And in the course of that testimony, did you relay to that body the same testimony you just relayed to this jury in regard to photographs of children and defense counsel attributing those to being the McCabe's children, which they were not?
Yes.
Now, you were asked some questions by Mr. Jackson in regard to what you knew or why your focus was not on Brian Alberts later on in the evening of January 29, 2022, correct?
Correct.
And why was that? Why was your focus not on Brian Albert at that time?
There was just
He was
no
a cop
evidence
too.
that Mr. Albert was involved anyway. Like I said before, from witness interviews, the statements Ms. Reed provided to witnesses, the one shoe left at the scene, the taillight pieces found underneath the snow that were dug out by the CERT team, the injuries to Mr. O'Keefe, the one shoe at the hospital that was observed, her statements to us, Sergeant Mechanic and I, while we interviewed her, clearly the broken taillight and the fact that leaving Brockton, instead of going to Dighton, she backtracked to go to Canton to retrieve her vehicle and then go double back to go to Dighton, which I found odd.
Now, if at any point in time over the course of your investigation you had evidence which led you to believe that Mr. Albert was involved in the death of Mr. O'Keefe, what would you have done?
Objection.
Speculation.
With regard to, again, you testified beyond January 29th. At any point in your investigation, did you find any information or evidence leading you to believe that Brian Albert was involved in the death of John O'Keefe?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
No.
Of course not.
Now, if
You weren't
had
looking for it.
Found information leading to that conclusion or evidence leading to that, what would you have done?
Speculation.
Then we'll allow it.
No, then myself and members of my office would have pursued that,
Regardless of his position, correct?
regardless of what he does for a profession.
You want me to approach?
Yes.
He's gonna approach. We'll fast forward while he
You-
approaches. Sorry.
Document I showed you the other day. Do you recognize that?
That is text communications between me and my high school buddies.
And sir, if I could direct your attention within there to page 2535. You were asked some questions about text on that page, but also there's a text on that page that begins with, "They arrived at house together," correct?
Correct.
And what is the date and time associated with that text message that you sent?
That was sent on January 29th, 2022 at 11 p.m.
And what is the content, or what did you send to that group in that text message?
The message reads, "They arrived at the house together, got into an argument. She was driving and left."
And so that's also information that you had late in the evening of January 29th, 2022, correct?
Objection.
Inform that, sustained.
With respect to that information you conveyed in that text message, when did you learn that?
During the course of the day on the 29th.
May I approach you?
Yes.
Just retreat. Spoke to on the 29th.
Oops. Go on.
Now, you were asked some questions about people that you spoke to on the 29th, correct?
Yes.
And that included Brian Albert, Jennifer McCabe, Matthew McCabe, Kerry Roberts, is that correct?
Trooper DeChico and Trooper Dunn interviewed Miss Roberts.
And my apologies. When I was saying you, I meant collectively.
Yes.
But you specifically yourself and Sergeant Mechanic, you also spoke with the defendant on January 29th, correct?
Correct.
And that would have been prior to any of the text communications that were contained within that chat with your friends, correct?
Correct.
Let me ask you something about charging decisions. Is that something that you make in this case or any case?
I don't make any charging decisions. We're essentially fact finders.
So as far as what Miss Reed was charged with or when she was charged with it, that's not something that's within your purview, correct?
No, not at all.
Now, specifically, you were asked some questions about some text messages between yourself and Trooper DeChico in regard to the medical exam, correct?
Correct.
And those occurred in April of 2022, is that correct?
Yes.
Was the defendant, Ms. Reed, charged with murder in April of 2022?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
No.
That wasn't until June of 2022, correct?
It's correct.
And that was at the conclusion of the grand jury, is that correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
And you're aware that there was a grand jury in this case, correct?
Objection. I'll withdraw that.
Okay.
Yes.
Answer that.
And are you aware of certain witnesses that testified at the grand jury?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
Yes.
Are you aware that Dr. Sporty Bello testified at the grand jury?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
Yes.
And so false reason then that the defendant wasn't charged with murder until after the grand jury concluded and Dr. Sporty Bello had testified before that grand jury, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Yeah, the conclusions that they can draw from the grand jury hearing is going to be sustained because, there's a different standard for a grand jury hearing. It's much easier to indict someone at a grand jury hearing than it is to convict. You don't want the jury to start thinking that they can bootstrap the conclusions that were made at the grand jury level because those standards were way lower than what they need to decide on the prosecution, than what the prosecution has to meet here. So this is why the defense is objecting to these various things, is because they want to limit how much the grand jury hearing is talked about in terms of the details that came out and the conclusions that can be drawn from them, because there's a good chance that the jury can get confused as to how much of that they can just adopt from those conclusions on their own. They have a much higher standard that they have to put the prosecution through in this trial, as opposed to what the grand jury needed to determine for the prosecution.
Now, the Albert family that you were familiar with some members of, that's not an entity, correct?
No.
Individual members of a family, some you know, some you may not know, correct?
Objection.
Sustained. Watch your phone, Mr. Allen.
Certainly wrong. How many members of the Albert family did you know when you started this investigation in January, or when you received this call on January 29th, 2022?
Julie, Chris Albert, Colin, and Kevin Albert.
Now, you were asked some questions about interviewing Julie Albert and Chris Albert at their home on February 10th, correct?
Yes.
Now, with respect to that date, had you ever been to that home prior to February 10th?
I'd not been to that. That's kind of their new home. I'd never been to their new home or the previous home either.
Now, as far as conversations with either Julie or Chris Albert, when was the last time you talked to them before you interviewed them on February 10th?
I believe I'd reached out to Julie to coordinate the interview, but prior to this case, there was that one random text message she sent me and my sister when I was going on a family ski trip. They weren't a part of it. She wanted me to take a video of my sister skiing, but
That was in February 2022. Correct?
yeah.
So what
Yes.
my question is prior to February 10th, 2022, prior to any arrangements to schedule an interview for February 10th, when was the last time that you spoke to either Julie Albert or Chris Albert, if you know?
I don't know. I can't remember.
Now, with regard to that text message in regard to skiing in late February 2022, you were shown that text message, correct?
Yes.
Was there any response from you?
No.
Did you have any further communication with Julie Albert after that interview on January 29th, 2022, related to this investigation?
I recall the serving her for grand jury. I know she wanted to kind of have an idea of what the process was like. So there's communications regarding that.
And was that something that was solely done with Julie Albert or other witnesses or what?
All the witnesses that were called in the grand jury, it's unusual for, the majority of civilians to be called in the grand jury. So they obviously have questions about the process.
Now, as far as babysitting for your children, is that something that Julie Albert ever did?
No.
And as far as those text communications between yourself and your sister regarding that, is that something that you had asked for or something that your sister had suggested?
Yeah, my sister had suggested that. We never followed up with having Julie watch my kids.
Now, you were asked some questions about text messages with your sister Courtney, correct?
Correct.
And I believe a couple times you would use the term, well, let me ask you this first. With regard to from January 29th throughout at least January, February 2022, this was this case became something that was on the news on a fairly regular basis, correct?
News and social media, yes.
And so when you were using the term in describing what you spoke to your sister about as far as newsworthy, what did you mean by that?
My sister lives in Canton, so there's a lot of, as well on the news and social media stuff that was being discussed on those platforms.
Now, as far as the discussions that you had with regard to your sister, how would you describe or how would you characterize the type of information that you shared with her, if any?
Just general information, nothing specific about the case.
Now, you were also asked about a specific text from your sister on January 30th. It started out with, I believe it was Jesus Christ. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that was in reference to the body of Mr. O'Keefe being found on Brian Albert's lawn, correct?
Correct.
And so she's asking you about that on January 30th, correct?
Yes.
So fair to reason that that wasn't something that you shared with her prior to January 30th, correct?
Correct.
And something that you hadn't shared with her at all at that point that you received that text communication, correct?
Mr. Standish, to your form. Watch how you ask these questions, Mr. Lally, is your witness.
Yes, sir. With regard to that information, as far as who
You may not want him, but he is, in fact, your witness. So you can't cross-examine him. You have to ask open-ended questions. You're not allowed to lead him. He is your witness, she reminds him.
Lally is your witness.
Yes, sir. With regard to that information, as far as who the homeowner was, what, if anything, had you shared with your sister Courtney prior to you receiving that text from her, indicating her knowledge?
Yeah, I don't recall sharing anything with in regards to the homeowner.
Now, in regard to any issues of a gift or request for a gift, How would you characterize that? Was that serious? Was that in jest? How would you characterize that?
I didn't take
I'll allow it.
I didn't take that offer seriously. And as I had mentioned, I believe on Monday, that I didn't ask for a gift. I never received one. I kind of said, get my wife a gift. She had been home about 10 straight nights with the boys. We had another homicide a week
Sorry.
before. So that was my response. Get Elizabeth one.
That's still not proper. That is still highly improper. That is still a gift to a police officer if it's a gift to his wife. And it's within that context. It's literally said in the text message that the gift is a thank you for his work in the investigation. So it doesn't matter if it was to him or to his wife. That is still improper. That is still can be looked at as a bribe. So the fact that he's just like, well, okay, that eliminates that. Like, that's fine. How many gifts has he gotten through his wife is what I want to know now. Throughout his career, I would like to know how many gifts his wife has received as a result of an investigation that he's done. I want to know. I would love to see an investigation into that.
She never received one.
Now, you were asked some questions about Colin Albert, correct?
Correct.
And as far as what, if any, information did you have as far as Colin Albert and his being at 34 Fairview at the same time as anyone from coming back from the waterfall?
My understanding, Colin arrived later on to just see his cousin's birthday. He didn't stay that long, maybe an hour, a little over an hour. And as he was leaving, I think he ran into his aunt and uncle as his ride had arrived out front and left at sometime around 12:10 a.m.
Was that information that you had prior to your interview with Colin Albert?
We knew Colin wasn't at the house. The timing was provided by Colin.
And at any point in time in your investigation, what, if any, evidence did you ever receive that Colin Albert was at 34 Fairview at the same time as Mr. O'Keefe or the defendant?
Based on Mr. O'Keefe's cell phone location data using his Waze app, Colin Albert is leaving around like 12:10 a.m. Mr. O'Keefe is about a half a mile away at 12:20 a.m. So they did not cross paths.
I apologize for the meowing. You guys have probably seen the cat enter the frame from time to time. This is my parents' cat, Fitzy. He is a wonderful, wonderful black cat named after F. Scott Fitzgerald. So if you hear that, that's what's happening. You're not going crazy. There is a cat in my room. He's not in the courtroom. He is obviously giving his very strong opinions on Trooper Michael Proctor. And yeah, he agrees with all of us guys. He thinks he's full of crap.
Now, Mr. Jackson was asking about some people as far as interviews or later in October or so of 2022 or beyond. You were given 5 names as far as Brian Albert Jr., Julie Nagel, Ms. Kent, Ms. Fabiano, Ms. Alba, and Ms. Levinson, and Colin Albert, correct?
Yes.
And then you were asked about 3 people that you had interviewed, and then were asked if there was only 1 person left, that being Colin Albert, correct?
Correct.
That math match up as far as 5 people, 3 given, and only 1 person not interviewed?
No.
Now, with reference to Ms. Kent, Ms. Fabiano, and Ms. Alba, to your knowledge, have they been interviewed at any point in time?
No.
And why not?
They weren't present for when the adults had arrived back from the waterfall.
So they had left 34 Fairview like Colin Albert prior to the waterfall people coming in.
Objection.
Sustained is that point.
What, if any, information did you have with regards to the whereabouts of Ms. Kent, Ms. Fabiano, Ms. Alba, and Colin Albert in relation to 34 Fairview and the arrival of people from the waterfall?
They had left the residence.
So with respect to Colin Albert, why was it that he was interviewed and not Ms. Kent, Ms. Fabiano, and Ms. Alba?
Colin was falsely accused of
Objection.
Falsely. Yeah.
Can you answer that same question Mr. Lally asked you differently?
yes, ma'am.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, he can't say falsely.
Colin was the subject of a
Opinion.
third-party culprit that had no evidence to back that up.
Objection.
Again, opinion.
That had no evidence to back that up, that he was involved whatsoever. My office and myself felt the need to interview Colin, sit him down, and get his story, his facts of that evening. So that's why we interviewed him at that date and time later on.
And when you say we, do you recall who was present with you when you interviewed Colin Alba?
Trooper Zachary Clark.
Are you aware of Sergeant Mechanic getting screenshots from both Colin Albert and from Miss Allie McCabe in relation to text communications they had about picking up Colin Albert from 34 Fairview on January 29th?
Yes.
You were asked some questions about Miss McCabe's cell phone, is that correct?
Yes.
And as far as any material on that phone, are you an expert when it comes to cell phone extractions and what different material may mean within a Cellbrite extraction?
No, that's left to Trooper Garino in our office.
Are you aware of reports regarding those searches from Trooper Nicholas Garino, a Miss Jessica Hyde, and a Mr. Ian Whiffen?
I am aware of those, yes.
And those are people who are experts, those are people who have special knowledge or specialized knowledge as it relates to Cellbrite technology that you do not, correct?
Objection.
Form of the question sustained.
What, if any, knowledge are you aware of Trooper Nicholas Garino, Miss Jessica Hyde, and Mr. Ian Whiffen having with respect to Cellbrite or cell phone technology that you do not have?
Objection.
Allowing it under voting.
Your Honor, may we approach?
Sure.
You are
Yeah, sometimes Fitzy gets he's enjoying being pet so much that he gives like a love bite. He just did that to me. No, he didn't draw any blood, so it's fine. Maisie Dancing, thank you so much for the super chat. Very, very kind of you. If you meant to add something to that, I'm going to look for it in the chat. And I'll make sure to save that or pull that up on the screen. All right. And otherwise, we are going to fast forward through this sidebar. There we go.
Procedure.
Yes.
Let me rephrase that just a little. As far as you're aware that Trooper Nicholas Garino, Miss Jessica Hyde, and Mr. Ian Whiffen have all looked at Miss McCabe's Cellbrite and extraction information, correct?
Yes.
And their knowledge, their specialized knowledge in regard to those areas exceeds your own, correct?
Yes.
If there are no objections, I'm going to put this at 1.25x speed. Let me know if you have any issues with this.
Now, as far as your conversations with Kevin Apple, how would you characterize those in relation to this investigation?
They had nothing to do with this investigation. Like I said, we were working a cold case together. We also work on other cases together that, unattended deaths that I'll respond to, a potential suicide or an overdose in the town of Canton that I'll respond to. But the topic of our conversations were in regards to the cold case or unresolved case that we're working together.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
The documents I did the other day. You recognize that?
Yes,
Yes, sir.
I do.
What do you recognize that?
Text communication with Kevin Albert.
And sir, if I could direct your attention to the bank stamp pages of 2600 and 2601.
Yes, sir.
Now, in regard to activities on that particular date, you had indicated that you had conversations with Kevin Albert about working a cold case from the town of Canton, correct?
Yes.
And specifically on that date, where did the two of you go?
I recall going down to the Cape to at least interview at least one person of interest.
And that was down in the town of Sandwich, to be specific. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, in reference to Kevin Albert leaving his badge in your car, you recall that?
I do.
If I could direct your attention to page 2602. And what, if any, text communication is contained on that page as far as you asking Kevin Albert any questions about his address?
After I informed Kevin Albert I had located his badge, I follow up, what's your address? I will drop it off after the gym.
You're asking his address because you don't know his address, correct?
Correct.
Sustained.
Why are you asking for his address?
I've never been to his house and I don't know where he lives.
You're so close with him that you don't know where his house is, correct?
Sustained.
Leading.
I approach this to retrieve your honor.
Yes.
Yeah.
You were asking questions
What route
about
did you take?
ring videos from One Meadows Avenue, Mr. O'Keefe's home. Is that
Love
correct?
Yes.
To be clear, did you delete any ring videos from Mr. O'Keefe's account, either on his app on his phone or from
He's going to say
materials
no.
received pursuant to the search?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely
Now, when
not.
You saw that there were ring videos missing from.
Absolutely not. The phrase that he loves to use, even in situations where we have every reason to doubt what he is saying. Absolutely not is one that he likes to give in those situations. Makes you wonder, is he actually telling the truth here, or is he not? I would love to hear a behavioral analyst do a full analysis of Trooper Proctor. Would love that.
Times that you expected videos to be. Specifically, what I'm asking about is Ms. Reed or the defendant's arrival at the home after leaving Fairview Road, and Ms. McCabe, Ms. Roberts, and the defendant's departure from One Meadows to Fairview Road later on that morning. What did you do?
I reached out to Ring several different times. They informed me if the video is deleted, there's no digital footprint of that. It's essentially kind of gone forever.
And with respect to that time frame, what, if any, other additional steps did you take to try to retrieve that video? Was there a second search warrant, sir?
Yes.
You were looking for additional information from that same ring video, correct?
Objection sustained.
What, if anything, were you looking for in that second search?
Additional video.
Now, you were asking questions about notes from Trooper DeChico, correct?
Correct.
As far as that 0041 note, do you know what that means?
That just tells me it's a time.
You know, the other thing about that is that he says that he went and contacted the Ring Corporation about a digital footprint for a deleted video, and their response was, if it's deleted, there's no digital footprint. No one will ever know. Would Karen Reed have known that if she's under suspicion for deleting the video? He knew that. He just testified that he knew that at some point. He was in a position to delete it. He's got, you know, a really bad track record in this case of starting with a narrative and finding facts to fill that narrative. Did he hide the Sallyport evidence from before? Did he conceal that from before? It certainly sounded like it on cross-examination. Jackson did ask also on cross-examination if he also deleted those portions of the ring footage. He knew that there would be no digital footprint. So he was in a position to do so. Did he delete it? I don't know. I don't know that this particular part on the redirect is helping the prosecution.
Do you know specifically whether or not that is something that Trooper DeChico saw or something that Trooper DeChico was looking for?
That's something Trooper DeChico could answer for.
I may have this moment.
Yes.
So you were asking questions about Sallyport video at Canton Police Station, correct?
Yes.
When you arrived at the Sallyport garage of the Canton Police Station sometime around or shortly after 5:30 p.m., correct?
Yes.
Now, that 5:30 p.m. time, is that before or after 5:07 a.m.?
After.
What kind of a question
5:07
is
a.m.
that?
is when the Exhibit 6, video number, I believe, 153, with the defendant backing out of the garage where you testified on Monday, you observed some damage to the taillight, correct?
Correct.
And
5:07 a.m. is when the ring footage shows her backing into John O'Keefe's car.
you're aware of some other ring video from Mr. O'Keefe's house showing the defendant, Ms. Roberts and Ms. McCabe, arriving at his house, in which you can see damage to the right passenger taillight, correct?
Correct.
Are you aware of a cruiser camera video from the Canton Police Station, Police Department, specifically Lieutenant Ray, going to One Meadows Ave at 8:22 in the morning on the 29th, in which you can also observe damage to the taillight?
Objection.
Sustained as to the form.
As far as 8:22 in the morning, what, if any, video from One Meadows Avenue are you aware of depicting the defendant's taillight?
Canton Police Department went to conduct a well-being check, and on the dash cruiser camera, you can see the back of Miss Reed's vehicle and the right taillight to be broken and missing pieces.
And as far as your time at the home indictment vehicle, the defendant's vehicle was towed from that location on that day, correct?
Correct.
And what, if any, video are you aware of from that driveway, which depicts the right rear passenger side taillight of the defendant's vehicle?
Yeah, as the vehicle's being put on the tow truck, you can make out that there's some pieces missing.
Now, sir, if I could turn you back to those text messages with your friends, January 29th, 2022. With that time in mind, at that point in time, well, let me ask before, as far as all those other videos that we talked to, all of those videos precede your time in the Sally Port garage at 5:30 p.m. on January 29th, correct?
Correct.
Now, with reference to, you mentioned in your testimony the other day, earlier, that at some point in time later in the day or early in that evening, you had met for a debriefing with yourself and the other troopers involved in the investigation on January 29th. Is that correct?
Yes.
So fair to say the information that had been collected by yourself and the other troopers on January 29th, you had that in mind, or you were aware of that when you were involved in these text communications with your friends, correct?
Yes.
And so were you, at that time that you're texting with your friends, you had seen the defendant's vehicle,
Correct. Yes.
and you had seen the damage to the taillight, correct?
Yes.
And you were aware that Lieutenant Tully and the CERT team had conducted a search around 34 Fairview and recovered Mr. O'Keefe's sneaker and a taillight.
Objection.
Sustained as to form.
What, if anything, were you aware of in regard to Lieutenant Tully doing with the CERT team at 34 Fairview earlier that day?
Detective Lieutenant Tully and the CERT team conducted a search, discovered several pieces of broken taillight pieces, as well as Mr. O'Keefe's missing shoe.
And the shoe that Lieutenant Tully and the CERT team had retrieved, what, if anything, did you observe in relation to that and the shoe that you and Sergeant Mechanic had retrieved from the Good Samaritan Hospital?
Yeah, they were matched. They were both black Nike sneakers with the white logo.
Now, you had talked to first responders, correct?
Yes.
And that included firefighter Flamati,
Correct.
and that included Sergeant Good.
Yes.
You had done interviews with regard to Brian Albert, correct?
Yes.
Jennifer McCabe, correct?
Correct.
Matthew McCabe, correct?
Yes.
The defendant
Yes.
and other troopers from your unit had also interviewed Kerry Roberts, correct?
Yes.
So you're aware of statements that were attributed by Ms. Roberts and Ms. McCabe to the defendant as far as what she told them earlier that morning?
Yes.
And you're aware of statements that Ms. McCabe and Ms. Roberts had made to the troopers in regard to what they had observed that morning?
Yes.
Now, were you aware that both Ms. McCabe and Ms. Roberts indicated in interviews on January 29th that when they had got to 34 Fairview Road, they could not see Mr. O'Keefe's body? However, the defendant sort of bolted out of the backseat of the vehicle directly over to Mr. O'Keefe's body.
Objection.
You can ask that differently, Mr. Lally.
With respect to the statements from Ms. McCabe and Ms. Roberts in regard to their arrival at 34 Fairview around 6 a.m. in the morning, what, if anything, stood out
Wait a second. We're at 1.25. If folks are having a hard time following along, let me know in the chat.
to you, or were you aware of in relation to those statements?
Yeah, from those statements, as Miss Roberts was driving down to Fairview, Miss McCabe was in the passenger seat, Miss Reed was in the back. Obviously, whiteout conditions as they're coming down like that slight hill, getting just before the left side of the property. Miss McCabe, Miss Roberts indicated that. Miss Reed said, "There he is. I see him." And Miss McCabe, Miss Roberts didn't know what Miss Reed was talking about. They stopped the car. Miss Reed ran directly over to John O'Keefe's body. And even when Miss Reed had exited the vehicle, Miss McCabe and Miss Roberts still didn't know what was going on and what she was running to.
It could also be that is looking for him in a particular way that, like, I'm every time they say that about how Karen was the first one to see him, I understand that can be suspicious. Absolutely, it can be. However, it's like the thing that it reminds me of, though, is when we were at like my brother's graduation or something, and he's like a tiny little speck in a crowd, and my mom is the one that's able to pick him out because she's mom. Like somehow moms are able to do that, right? I'm, you know, when I'm looking for Mr. Bites in a crowd and I managed to pick him out, like it's, I probably am more likely to see him before other people do because of the something about the closeness of the relationship. You know what I mean? There also could be something to that here. I'm not saying that to completely wave off the idea that somebody finds him first because they knew where he was all along. That's always a possibility, but I'm just looking at it from a different perspective because they've repeated this quite a few times in this trial. That it makes me wonder thinking about it from another perspective. Also, Laura, I'm not sure if I mentioned this earlier, but thank you for becoming a YouTube member. Welcome to Bite Club. I may have skipped over this earlier. If so, I really apologize. Very happy to have you here. Also, XMO, new member. Welcome to Bite Club. So happy to have you here as well. And Trisha A also became a YouTube member. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Very, very happy to have you here. So thank you so much, guys, for supporting the channel. Seriously, it really, really does help to give us the ability to devote resources and time and all this kind of stuff into stuff like this trial, recaps, further videos moving on out of this trial once this one does wrap up, and other trials that'll be coming up as well. So other trials coming up like the Adam Baldwin trial. Maybe one of these days a Sarah Boone trial will happen. We'll see. She now needs a ninth attorney at this point. Courtney Clenny is one that we've been tracking, that we definitely will be watching when that goes to trial. Donna Adelson, that one is a maybe, a very big maybe, because of the fact that is the same month that Baby Bites comes to being. So maybe not. We'll see if I can at least maybe do some recaps. Probably not going to be live streaming that one though, but we'll see. So thank you guys so much for supporting the channel here.
Now, were you aware from your conversation with firefighter Famati that the defendant had stated, I hit him in the presence of firefighter Famati earlier that morning?
Yes.
And were you also aware of statements the defendant made to other first responders about her getting into an argument with Mr. O'Keefe as she was dropping him off at 34 Fairview, indicating the last time she saw him?
Later on in subsequent interviews.
So at the time that you're sending these text communications within this group chat in the later part of the evening, January 29th, 2022, what is it that you did know in relation to your investigation with regard to Ms. Reed, the defendant, and or anyone else?
All right. So we knew the last person seen with Mr. O'Keefe alive was Miss Reed. We knew they were traveling to Fairview Road. Witnesses stated they saw a SUV out front of the house. We went from one side to the other. Miss McCabe was texting John, parked behind me, things of that nature. John never went into the house. And then the following morning, Miss Reed, Miss Roberts, and Miss McCabe located Mr. O'Keefe in the front lawn. I observed those injuries at the hospital. The one sneaker. Later on in the day, the CERT team, along with Detective Lieutenant Tully, found broken taillight pieces that matched Miss Reed's taillight, as well as the missing sneaker that matched Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle. Some inconsistent statements that Miss Reed had provided to Sergeant Buchanan and I.
So at the time that you made those comments, disparaging comments in regard to Miss Reed in the context of those communications with your friends, as inexcusable, as unprofessional as those comments are, the information you had was that Miss Reed had struck Mr. O'Keefe with her vehicle.
Yeah, you've got to watch the form, Mr. Allen. It's sustained.
The time that you made those inexcusable and unprofessional comments, what did you believe the defendant had done to Mr. O'Keefe?
As if to justify it.
I believe, based on all the physical evidence and facts, Mr. O'Keefe got out of that vehicle holding that cocktail glass he walked out of the waterfall bar with. Miss Reed pulled ahead and then backed into him, struck him with her vehicle, and then left.
And then came back 5.5 hours later, correct?
Correct.
Objection leading.
Jackson?
Very briefly, Your Honor.
Ooh, redirect or recross. Let's
So
do
you
it.
think that your assessment, personal assessment, that Karen Reed had struck this officer with a car, gave you license to call her a cunt,
Ooh.
Objection.
I'll allow it.
right?
Yep.
Based on the evidence, sir, then my motions got the best of me. So it was in poor taste. Yes, it was important. It was inappropriate, juvenile, but it was my motions that gotten the best of me.
And you called her a whack job. Gave you license to call her that too.
Yes,
Gave you license to say to your friends, oh, no. She's fucked, right?
that's what I wrote.
Gave you license to say that she's a retard.
Again, another disgusting comment.
Sir, you had an agenda from moment one, did you not?
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you have an agenda?
Objection.
No, I
Sustained.
didn't.
That was a good one the first time. So the fact that you believed personally that your narrative was that she hit him with a car, you get to talk about her leaky balloon now, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
Okay, sorry. We'll get it back to normal because he does talk faster than Lally does.
Indicated on cross-examination that you saw a video at 8:22 a.m. with some damage to Miss Reed's right rear taillight, correct?
Yes,
8:22 before or after 5:07 a.m.?
after.
You also said that you had no idea where Kevin Albert lived, right?
Correct.
But you did say about getting his badge to him after that drunken night with him, that you just leave it in your mailbox, right?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Yes, my mailbox.
Yeah. So he obviously knew where you lived.
Yes,
And then you said, there's no evidence whatsoever, your words, no evidence whatsoever. You talked about Brian Albert, Brian Higgins, Colin Albert, no evidence whatsoever that they were involved in the death of John O'Keefe, right?
correct.
Trooper Proctor, you're the one responsible for gathering the evidence, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Right?
I am one part of a greater group of detectives that gathers evidence. I'm just one part of that unit.
You're the pointy end of the spear, aren't you?
Objection.
Sustained.
You're the case officer, the lead detective, correct?
Yes,
Sort of like the fox guarding the hen house, isn't it?
Objection.
That's gonna be
That's
sustained.
Mr. Jackson, do you have anything else?
Yeah, that was gonna be sustained.
All right, Trooper, you are all set.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ooh-wee.
Thank you, jurors.
And yeah.
Right to jail, right away.
Next witness, Mr. Lally.
That's where he's going.
Yes, Your Honor. Call Lieutenant Brian Tully to the stand.
Oh no, after that? Okay. Okay. All right. Brian Tully.
I'm just gonna actually mic stuff up.
And let's see here. You know what? Let's get some questions before he gets sworn in. Let's get some questions here because I want to make sure that we're all caught up. All right. Dejan Lujic. I wonder in general, how much did prosecution invest into preparing their witnesses? Does this really happen like this? Like what we see in TV series? Generally speaking, I would say that witnesses should be better prepared than what we have seen in this trial. And I have a feeling that when we get to the defense case in chief, the witnesses that they call will probably be much better prepared. That's my expectation based on what we've seen so far from these attorneys. Suki London, Legalbytes, his Proctor's victimhood rant opened the door for defense to reveal feds are investigating him. I think that if the judge had allowed him to continue, I don't know that opens the door necessarily, because you don't necessarily need that to rebut the kind of stuff that he was talking about, the weird allegations of like being followed and that kind of stuff. So I am just glad that she struck that. I mean, because here's the thing. it's one thing for a totally lay witness who's not a professional there to be testifying about harassment and that kind of thing, which already was not good, not good. But that's one thing for a professional to go into a whole rant about stuff that he should not be going into. He should know better. He really should know better. Dan Luch, question: how does the grand jury proceeding work? So grand juries are very easy to get an indictment for the prosecution. Defense isn't even there, so they don't even get to cross-examine. In some states, like New Mexico, I recently learned is a little bit different. They've got some guardrails in place to sort of protect the ultimately the what becomes a defendant, the subject of the indictment, I should say. Otherwise, it's like you basically the prosecution gets to decide what kind of evidence they put in front of a grand jury, and if it looks halfway reasonable, halfway decent, they will indict. An indictment on its own does not mean anything about whether or not that case can actually be result in a conviction, I should say. So basically, it looks otherwise in some respects. It looks quite a bit like a trial. They're there. It's just the prosecution and the grand jury. Grand jury oftentimes can ask questions and things like that. Kind of in a bit more of a dialogue situation, but yeah, it's not nearly as adversarial in nature as an actual full trial. Adversarial meaning where you get challenged by the other side, by the defense. Jerry Roth, Legalbytes, can Lally ask this many questions on redirect? Feels more like a direct. He can, so long as they are things that were addressed on cross-examination. They have to be sort of narrowing the scope as you go to redirect and then to recross and then redirect. It's got to be something that was addressed in the previous level. So yeah, and I definitely think that the strategy there was just let's bore them to death again so that they hopefully forget some of the outrageous stuff that they just heard on cross-examination. Emma Santor, Alita, please cover the Idaho case whenever it's in court. Absolutely. The one thing that would interfere with that one is it's supposed to be in the summer 2025, next summer. We might be moving. If that happens, I will do my best to try to stay on top of it while also, managing other, balls getting juggled in the air. But that's something that I'm highly interested in trying to also cover, even if I've got some of that other stuff going on. But if we would also be moving countries and all kinds of stuff. So that's the one asterisk with that case, is the timing of it. If it gets pushed back from next summer, then there's a much better chance of me being able to cover it in full, like I have been doing here. U.S. Galucci, Legalbytes, worst case scenario, one juror votes guilty and we have a hung jury / mistrial. Gig 'em. Yeah, I see that. I see it that way. I don't see how this can result in a conviction ultimately at the end of the day. There's just too much reasonable doubt here, and especially after Trooper Proctor's testimony today and on Monday. And also right back at you. Hook 'em. Okay, let's see here. There is one more question here from Tish. I think the current date is spring 2025, but everyone believes it will be set during summer because prosecution defense has expressed interest in that time period. Okay. Yeah, that sounds about right. So, and that one also I anticipate would probably be kind of a long trial as well. So we'll see. Gonna keep some tabs on it for sure. Okay. Now let's get on to Lieutenant Tully.
Officer, the evidence given to the court and jury in the case now hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Take this.
Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Lally, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Would you please state your name and spell your last name for the jury?
Brian Tully, Tully,
And how are you employed, sir?
with the Massachusetts State Police.
And how long have you been a member of the state police?
18 years.
And what rank or assignment do you currently have with the Mass State Police?
The rank I hold is Detective Lieutenant, and my current role is the unit commander for the Norfolk State Police Detective Unit.
And now, how long have you been, let me ask you first, as far as, how long have you been a lieutenant of the state?
I was a first lieutenant in 2021, and then I attained the rank of detective lieutenant later in 2021.
And with reference to your current unit, how long have you been a member of that?
I've been with the Norfolk State Police Detective Unit for 12 years.
And prior to and throughout the course of your work within the detective unit, the Norfolk DA's office for the state police, what, if any, specialized training have you received and or given in regard to investigations and how they're conducted?
For the first 10 years as the rank of trooper and sergeant, I was on the homicide section of the unit. When first entering the unit, I received instruction on how to conduct homicide and death investigations. In addition to that, I attended over 200 hours of specialized training in the use of cell phones and cell phone technology in the furtherance of criminal investigations. Further on, I have now been an instructor about cell phones and cell phone technology and criminal investigations. I've taught death investigation classes around the Commonwealth, and as well as search and seizure law in Massachusetts.
Now, if I could ask you just with respect to your unit,
Sorry about that. Let's put it back to 1.25. Yeah, let's do it.
if you could explain to the jury sort of what is the role and what does your unit do with respect to death investigations within Norfolk County?
So each district attorney's office has a state police detective unit assigned to it. So Mass General Law, Section 38, Section 4 says that the district attorney is in charge of all death investigations. So if someone passes away, essentially not in the presence of a doctor or the circumstances that led to their death was outside the presence of medical care, the district attorney is in charge of the investigation or their representative. And so each DA has a state police detective unit assigned to them to act as their representative. In certain jurisdictions like Boston, Worcester, and Springfield, the DAs in those counties have said that those local departments can be their representatives, but throughout the Commonwealth, the state police is the DA's representative in those death investigations.
Now, as far as assignments go, or as far as how is it that, well, as far as how an investigation is run, how is it that a call comes in? If you could take the jury through sort of from the time the call comes in, how that investigation is.
I'll talk in a typical state. Oftentimes someone passes away, again, not in the presence of a doctor, gets found by somebody, a loved one, a friend, a passerby. They call 911, which gets routed to the local police who respond and come to learn that someone has passed away in the circumstance. That police department will then call the troop headquarters on the state police. The state police is cut up in different troops by geographic location. Each troop duty lieutenant would have a list of who the on-call person is for the state police detective unit of jurisdiction. They would then call that trooper or sergeant directly to inform them that there's a death in a certain community and give them a telephone number to contact somebody who's directly on scene to get more information.
Now, as far as your role as sort of the supervisor or the lieutenant in charge of the unit, can you describe to the jury sort of what your role is in regard to those investigations?
So within the detective unit, we have the homicide section, a narcotics section does narcotics investigations, and a special investigation section. So specific to the homicide section, there are certain levels of supervision. We have a sergeant assigned to the homicide section. I have an executive officer who's a lieutenant, and then me. So multiple levels of supervision specific to any of the sections, including the homicide section.
Now, turning your attention to January 29th, 2022, at some point did you become aware in the morning with regard to a death within the town of Canton?
Yes.
And what, if any, when did you become aware and how did you become aware initially of what had transpired?
Shortly after 7 a.m. that date, I received a call from Sergeant Yuri Buchanan informing me that a person by the name of John O'Keefe was found unresponsive in Canton. He was transported to Good Samaritan Hospital, where it was expected he was not to survive. Normally, I would not get a call like that, but we learned that Mr. O'Keefe was an active Boston police officer. Sergeant Buchanan wanted to make me aware of it at that point.
And so then what happened from there as far as your unit involved?
So as we learned more information about what was found on scene by the Canton Police Department, Trooper Proctor, who was the on-call the on-call trooper that day on the schedule, and Sergeant Buchanan responded to Canton Police to begin the investigation. And they would keep me updated as they learned more information.
Now, as far as your unit is concerned, what, if any, role does your unit have, or what, if any, jurisdiction does your unit have with relation to any kind of death, whether it be homicide, suicide, unattended death, within the confines of Norfolk County?
We have exclusive jurisdiction by law, but the law also suggests that we need to work with the local police departments as well.
And so how is it that typically in a typical investigation that your unit would work in conjunction with the local police department in relation to a death investigation?
Their detective unit would be involved if they have one, and some departments in Norfolk County don't. They would stand by to wait for our arrival. There'd be constant communication between responding trooper and the detective on scene about things that need to be done prior to our arrival, but essentially ask for or wait for our guidance on what to do next.
And as far as certain investigations go, are there decisions sometimes that are made with regard to your involvement or maybe your unit not being involved in a death investigation?
Yes.
And how are those determinations made and who makes those determinations?
It falls to either the person who's on call or their supervisor. We don't respond to all of those calls. So a police officer may call and say that a woman in her 80s has passed away in bed overnight. Her primary care doctor has said that she struggled with cancer or treatment, and that doctor is willing to sign a death certificate. In those circumstances, it's not suspicious, it's not a suicide or a fatal opioid overdose. We would not respond in that case. That would be one that we would decline. In other circumstances, we may get the call and then learn that the person's going to survive, and so we will not respond. We typically will mirror what the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, if they're involved, then we'll definitely be involved.
This is something.
Now,
Oh, whoops.
turning to that point, as far as the Office of the Chief Medical
This is something that that I also learned when I toured the LA County Coroner's Office, which is basically if there's a sudden death, an unexplained death, it's not under supervision of a doctor, that that is a situation where the coroner would be called in, for example. So Amanda, to answer your question, if someone dies in the middle of the night from a heart attack in Massachusetts, does that become an investigation? Am I misunderstanding what he said? It can, unless they call that person's primary care doctor and find out, yes, this person has a heart condition, they've been taking medication for it, this and that and this and that. So like this is something that they've been struggling with, or maybe they find out from their doctor, well, yeah, they had a little bit of a heart issue and they had some medication, but it was being treated, and so everything was coming back fine. This is still strange, then they might investigate. So that's the kind of thing that would kind of come up related to, say, a heart attack. So, but yeah, if there's like a sudden death, that's where they'll excuse me, that's where they'll get involved for stuff like that. It's not just in Massachusetts. All right. And okay. I think. Okay, Kat. All right. Let's continue with the testimony.
where the doctor is concerned. In any sort of death investigation that your unit is involved in, what, if any, involvement or communication do troopers from your unit or yourself have with the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner?
We have constant communication. The law that I cited also says that the Office of Chief Medical Examiner has exclusive jurisdiction as well to determine the cause and manner of death. So we work closely hand in hand to figure out the circumstances that led to the death.
Now, as far as working close hand in hand with the medical examiner's office, what does that sort of typically entail?
Takes a turn of phone calls. We'll call in and speak to the intake person or the on-call doctor to tell them what we've learned or what we're observing. We forward reports in every case to the doctors, they understanding at least what we learned in the first 24 hours. Doctors will often reach back out to us asking for scene photographs, more reports, ask questions. And in instances where it's a suspicious death, we will send an investigator to the autopsy to stand with the doctor to make observations and answer any questions for the doctor.
Now, as far as the determinations that are ultimately come to by the medical examiner,
Right to jail, right away.
I couldn't help myself.
Lieutenant, as far as any determinations that are made with reference to either cause or manner in any instance with the medical examiner, what, if any, role do you or anyone from your unit have with regard to that decision by the medical examiner?
We have little to no role outside of providing information.
And as far as the determination specifically, whether it's manner or cause, what, if any, impact does that have with regard to any death investigation that you're doing?
Well, the cause will give us a big incident. So we want to know if the person died of a heart attack or if they died of a gunshot wound. That's big when it comes to then making charging decisions about circumstances. So it's important to learn the cause, and to get the doctor's input on the manner is also helpful.
But as far as the manner, if the manner is found to be undetermined, would that impact what you've learned through the rest of the course of your investigation as far as charging goes? No,
that determination by the OCME is often in the early stages of investigation. And as we learn more information, the circumstances can change.
And the determination that is made by the medical examiner, that's strictly from a medical perspective, correct?
Correct.
Now, with regards to January 29th, 2022, in this call that is initially received, Trooper Proctor and Sergeant Mechanic then essentially respond to the Canton Police Department first. Is that correct?
Yes.
And as far as your role as it pertains to this or any other investigation, how much involvement do you have, or how are you sort of apprised of what's going on?
Sergeant Mechanic, in this case, and in typical cases, he's keeping me updated by telephone, so I can supervise from anywhere with my cell phone. He's giving me updates about what he's learning. We'll discuss what the next step should be. And that's what transpired over the morning of January 29th.
Now, over the course of the morning of January 29th, what, if any, conversations did you have with relation to Canton Police Department's involvement or ongoing or further involvement with regard to this investigation?
I had spoken with the acting chief at the time, the current chief, the chief at the time, Kenneth Berkowitz, about the involvement in the Canton Police Department. We talked about the homeowner where at 34 Fairview and his relationship to his department. And because of the appearance of a conflict, we had made a decision that the Canton Police was going to take a step back from the investigation and that state police would do the investigation without them.
Now, as far as that appearance of a conflict or step back, as you termed it, what was your understanding at that time as far as what the role of the Canton Police would be?
Really to provide support. So anytime we're in a local community, we need the support of local police. If we're going to start knocking on doors, we want to make sure they're aware or present. They have resources in town, whether it be lights or barriers that we may need to access. So I would define it as a support role.
Now, with respect to those conversations you mentioned that you had yourself and what the then current chief, Kenneth Berkowitz, who, if anyone else, was involved in those conversations?
The district attorney.
That would be Mr. Morrissey, is that correct?
Yes.
Is that abnormal for him to be involved in conversations in regard to the police department and any sort of appearance of conflict?
No, it's not abnormal for him to be involved.
And as far as his involvement in his conversations, as far as you're aware, did they evolve, or were they any greater or less than the conversations that you had with Chief Berkowitz?
No, they were the same conversations.
Let me ask you this, Lieutenant. At some point over the course of this case, or at some point over the course of this investigation, did you become aware of certain text messages on Trooper Proctor's personal phone?
Yes.
And upon your being made aware of those text communications, what, if anything, did you as a supervisor, what, if anything, did you do?
I had a long discussion with him about the content and nature of them. I expressed my displeasure as unprofessionalism and the content of them, and then I reported up my chain of command.
Was he admonished in any way?
He was by me at that conversation, yes.
Now, sir, again, just sort of in general terms, you're familiar with this investigation as you're supervising the unit that was investigating it, correct?
Yes.
Now, is it typical practice?
Well, here's another question though. You had maybe admonished him. Okay. I'd like to know how exactly you admonished him. How else was he, how, if anyhow, was he published? If in any way was he published? Was he reprimanded for that behavior? But also, what about the other guys that were in these texting threads? What about Trooper DeChico? What about Trooper Buchanan? What about, all of these guys that were part of this? Like, is that all you did? You just reported this guy because you knew that this was about to get out now, and that's why you reported him and then gave him a few harsh words and then sent him on his way? I would like some more details, sir.
Practice in conducting homicide or death investigations as far as civilian witnesses are concerned to seize their personal cell phone?
It's not uncut. It happens. Yes.
And is that a practice that occurs with respect to every single witness in every single case?
No.
And so what are sort of the parameters, or what would be some of the reasons that certain civilian witnesses' cell phones would be seized versus others?
Well, you use the word seize. So when I think of the word seize, I'm thinking in the legal context where I think there's probable cause to believe, more likely than not, there's evidence of the crime I'm investigating held within the data of that phone. Sometimes if we believe there's information on the phone, we may ask for consent for that one specific thing or for that one specific reason. But outside of that, unless I have that belief there's data on a phone, I won't ask for consent or seize a phone and pursue a search warrant.
Now, are you aware of certain cell phones that were either seized or granted access via consent in relation to this investigation?
Yes.
And specifically, Mr. O'Keefe's phone was taken into custody, correct?
Yes.
And the defendant's phone was taken into custody on January 29th as well?
Yes.
Now, as far as civilians, there were two civilian witnesses whose phones were given via consent and then extracted, that being a Jennifer McCabe and a Kerry Roberts, correct?
Yes.
And so why was it that Ms. McCabe's phone and Ms. Roberts' phone was taken versus some other witnesses?
They had information relative to the actions of Ms. Reed and the communications with specifically those two individuals on the morning of the 29th. So we wanted to memorialize them and save them.
Now, sir, with respect to your involvement on January 29th, where and when did you sort of leave and become involved in the investigation beyond sort of a supervisor?
Shortly after noontime, we had learned more information that necessitated a broader search. So I had reached out to Lieutenant Kevin O'Hara with the State Police CERT team to assist with processing of a scene. And so since we were going to be processing a scene, it was prudent for me to leave my house, dig out, and drive to Canton.
And sir, with respect to, you mentioned dig out from your house. What were the conditions like around the time that you were leaving?
There's probably 8 to 10 inches at the house. So I had to dig out my driveway and the large snowbank at the end of the driveway that's caused by the plow in order to get a vehicle out and head to Canton.
And where is it first that you were heading to?
I first went to the Canton Police Department to talk to Chief Berkowitz and wait for the arrival of the CERT team, and then to 34 Fairview.
And as far as the CERT team was concerned, if you can explain to the jury sort of the process from your perspective, from your end, as far as activating the CERT team, what it is that they do and why you had requested.
We work with Lieutenant O'Hara frequently. I called him on a cell phone, and the CERT team is out of a different chain of command. So the State Police is a very paramilitary organization with specific chains of commands with different structures. So I reached out to him and asked for his assistance with this investigation. He had to get further approval up his chain of command, mostly for overtime and to pay the troopers to come out. That would be the way that I would make a formal request to the CERT team.
And so the initial phone call that you made to Lieutenant O'Hara, you don't have the power or the authority to sort of direct him to dispatch his team and go to 34 Fairview, correct?
Correct.
And so as far as that initial phone call that you made to Lieutenant O'Hara, do you know about what time of the day that was?
It was about 2 in the afternoon.
And what was the purpose of sort of that initial phone call that you made to Lieutenant O'Hara?
To give him a heads up, because it needs to be a conversation up my chain of command. So above me, there's a detective captain and a major. My major needs to really talk to his major to make the formal request. But I wanted Lieutenant O'Hara to be aware of the request was coming so that he could at least start polling his people to see who was available to respond to Canton.
And with respect to the weather, if you could just in general terms describe for the jury sort of what you observed as far as the weather conditions on that.
I observed blizzard-like conditions. It was snowing heavily, windy, low visibility.
John, may I approach?
Yes.
And do you recognize those, sir?
I do.
And what do you recognize those to be?
They are certified records from the U.S. Department of Commerce out of Asheville, North Carolina, for weather reports from Norwood Memorial Airport, Massachusetts, for the dates of January 2022 and February 2022.
We definitely need to know that it's snowing. We need to make sure that we've got reports from the government officially that it was in fact snowing.
So for the entirety of the month of January 2022 as well as February 2022, correct?
Yes.
And are you familiar with the Norwood Municipal Airport and where it is in relation to the town of Canton?
Yes.
Where is it?
It's the next town over.
And as far as, are you familiar with a Neponset Street in Norwood?
I am.
And does Neponset Street also carry into the town of Canton as well?
Yes.
And with regard to 34 Fairview Road, about how far away is 34 Fairview from Neponset Street?
From the Ponza Street, it's a mile, 2 miles.
So relatively same geographic area as far as the Norwood Municipal Airport and 34 Fairview Road.
Yeah, I would say as the crow flies from 34 Fairview to Norwood Municipal Airport, that's probably 3 miles.
And sir, with regard to the records for you, from your memory of those dates and those times in January and February 2022, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of what the weather was like, temperature-wise as well as precipitation?
Yes.
I love that question.
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Come up to seek to introduce in minutes.
Now, do you want to see anything?
Yeah, because it was snowing. I mean, maybe he'll finally go with this somewhere, or maybe not.
34 Fairview Road. And so, Lieutenant, at some point you respond to 34 Fairview Road. Is that correct?
Yes.
And do you recall about what time it was that you arrived there?
5:30 p.m.
And when you arrived there, who, if anyone else from the state police preceded your arrival?
There was at least 2 members of the CERT team present, including Lieutenant O'Hara.
And if you recall, where were they located in relation to the residence?
They were directly in front of the residence.
Now, as far as their search was concerned, how was a determination made, or who, if anyone, made a determination as far as where they were going to search?
So typically when I work with Lieutenant O'Hara, I kind of give him direction. So in this case specifically, I learned from Sergeant Buchanan that Mr. O'Keefe was found in an area between the flagpole and the fire hydrant. So we concentrated that area. And so I talked to Lieutenant O'Hara that this is going to be our parameters, and he instructed his people how to deploy or to that area.
At first, I thought he was saying directions like from Canton PD, and then he was going to give street directions, and we were going to need to play the Californians clip again. Thank goodness he didn't.
And now, sir, as far as beyond sort of directing as far as an area is concerned, what, if any, other involvement do you typically have when it comes to the search team and how they conduct their search?
They're professionals with expertise in that. So essentially, I just point them in the direction, and it's up to them to figure out how to deploy it and get the mission done.
And so what, if any, involvement do you have as far as when they begin and how many people are involved, or when they end, or anything like that?
I'll have some consultation with Lieutenant O'Hara, but it's really his call to make.
And as far as this particular search on January 29th, you know how many members of the search team eventually responded and how the search was conducted?
There were 7 members. Most, if not all, had typical snow shovels, and they used those shovels to systematically go through the snowbank that was in front of 34 Fairview within these 2 perimeters.
And over the course of, now as far as where they were searching, can you describe sort of the road conditions as far as snow removal had concerned, or where the precipitation amounts were concentrated with respect to the road? So
the road was only plowed really right down the middle. Barely 2 vehicles could get by at a time. The snowbanks on either side of the road were protruding into the road. So that was kind of the snow setup. Our cruisers were just kind of buried in snowbanks a little bit down the road as we excavated this.
And sir, as far as this search was concerned, what, if any, information did you provide to Lieutenant O'Hara as far as items being searched for, or what was he directed to be looking for?
There were 2 items specifically. We were looking for potential pieces of a taillight of a vehicle and a shoe.
And as far as a shoe and potential pieces of a taillight, where did that information come from, or why were those the items that were being looked for?
Relative to the shoe, when Sergeant Buchanan and Trooper Proctor responded to Good Samaritan Hospital and collected the clothing of Mr. O'Keefe, they realized that there was only 1 shoe present at the hospital. They had contacted the Canton EMS and other people who cared for him, and they'd learned that a shoe wasn't removed at the scene, and that when Canton Fire and EMS arrived, Mr. O'Keefe only had 1 shoe on. So it was important to locate that second shoe. Relative to the taillight, we had gotten information that witnesses stated that Ms. Reed's vehicle had a broken taillight. And so we were looking for evidence of it being broken at that location.
And with respect to the search that was conducted by Lieutenant O'Hara and members of the search team, where was that in relation to either the roadway or the front lawn of 34 Fairview?
As we were excavating this, or as they were excavating this snowbank in front of it, we realized that the snowbank protruded about 3 feet into the roadway. So as they were moving this first part of the snowbank, we're essentially shoveling the road. And so as they continued on there, they would then hit the curb area.
And as far as
If you are wondering why we are listening to this witness right now, because so far everything that he has talked about has been already talked about by other witnesses, you're not alone. I'm also wondering the same thing. So just so you guys know, so far there's nothing here that seems to be anything new.
beyond the curb area, as far as grass and front lawn, was the CERT team members, from your observations, able to go beyond the curb into the front lawn area?
No, they're having difficulty shoveling with plastic snow shovels onto the lawn, from the lawn.
And Your Honor, may I approach the witness? Oh, actually, I'm sorry. Lieutenant Tully, with respect to the CERT team in their search, what, if anything, did you do to document and memorialize their efforts as far as any items that were recovered?
I took photographs of items that were eventually found in place and documented them in a report, and they were collected in evidence bags.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Helena asking, is it necessary?
I may have one moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
Maybe there's something that he's going to get to that we just don't know about yet. But so far,
Jurors, we'll be stopping at 4 today. Okay.
so far it just doesn't feel, yeah. And we are behind in the chat. So she said we'll be stopping at 4. It's already past 4 East Coast time. So we've got, maybe like 10 minutes left, I guess.
Sir, with respect to, I'm going to place before you, I'm direct your attention to what's been marked as 111 through 134, just in general. Just asking,
I do.
what do you recognize those?
The photographs that I took that afternoon.
May I approach this to retrieve, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, I don't want to belabor the point, but if I could just publish just a couple of these exhibits.
Okay.
Lieutenant. And Ms. Gilman, if I could have exhibit 111.
Are we going to see the same photos that we've seen of the hat and the shoe? And
Lieutenant, there should be a laser pointer on the desk before you. If I could ask, first of all, do you recognize what's up on the screen as exhibit 111?
Yes.
And what do you recognize that to be?
The front of 34 Fairview Road in Canton and the flagpole I previously mentioned.
And if you could, using the laser pointer, just direct your attention to what, if anything, is significant you observe in this exhibit.
So this picture was taken to memorialize this piece of red plastic here.
we've seen this.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have exhibit 114.
We've seen this.
Again, Lieutenant, do you recognize what's up on the screen as exhibit 114?
Yes.
And if you could, using the laser pointer, direct your attention to what, if anything, is significant you observe it.
It's that same previously mentioned red plastic. The purposes of the multiple photographs, I'll take one as overalls, and as I get closer, I'll take more photographs to get better context.
And these photographs of these items, were they taken, the items that you're photographing, were they moved in any way prior to you memorializing them with photographs?
Yes, this piece in particular, a CERT team member, as he was removing the snow with the shovel, had picked up this piece of plastic with it. I asked him to place it back where he found it, where it approximately was, so that I can memorialize it in place.
So it was picked up and you asked him to put it back where you found it, and he did so?
Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have exhibit 117. And again, Lieutenant, you recognize what's up on the screen as exhibit 117.
Yes.
What do you recognize that?
Members of the CERT team doing their excavation of the snowbank.
And Ms. Gilman, if
Seen
I could
this
have exhibit
also.
120.
We've seen this.
Again, sir, do you recognize what's up on the screen as exhibit 120?
Yes.
And if you could, using the laser pointer, direct your jury's attention to what, if anything, of significance you observed in this photograph.
A black Nike sneaker with a white sole that was recovered in the snowbank.
And at some point subsequent to this, what, if any, comparison did you do visually with the sneaker that you observed in this photograph with respect to the sneaker that was recovered from the Good Samaritan by Trooper Proctor and Sergeant McCann?
They matched both in make and model, size. The shoe that was recovered by the troopers at the hospital was a right sneaker. This one found was the left, or a left.
The only thing that would be new is if Lally then says, okay, now show the jury the sneaker that you found, which again wouldn't be necessary because we've already heard from Trooper O'Hara and from others that were part of this team, and or at the very least Trooper O'Hara, he could have also brought in the shoe. Like this, so far, this witness's testimony feels like a waste of time.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 127. And again, sir, do you recognize what's up there as 127?
Yes.
And if you could, using that laser pointer, direct the jury's attention to what, if anything, of significance you observed in that photograph.
A clear piece of plastic.
We've seen this.
Now, with respect to this clear piece of plastic, what, if anything, did you observe or did you note of significance as far as the surface of that particular piece of clear plastic?
I noticed that it's curvature in shape, and there are raised dimples, for lack of a better term, that were along the outside of this piece of plastic, or on one side of it.
Now, Ms. Gilman, if I could have, lastly from this group, exhibit 131. And again, Lieutenant, do you recognize what's up on the screen as exhibit 131?
Yes.
We've also
What
seen
do you
this
recognize
photo.
that?
That is a photograph that I took at 34 Fairview that depicts a red piece of plastic.
Ms. Gilman, you can take that down and across. We can have the lights back on. Thank you. Now, with respect to the items that were observed and photographed by you on January 29th during the search team search, what happened with those items from the scene?
They were collected, placed in an evidence bag, and brought back to our offices to be secured.
And if you could, as far as the evidence sort of system is conducted with regard to this case and other cases and investigations within your unit, can you explain to the jury that process of sort of when an item is seen or an item of evidentiary value is seized, what happens?
First, to provide context, by policy, I am the evidence officer for the unit, and I have assistant evidence officers who assist me in the caretaking of the evidence. So
Okay, so maybe we'll actually hear something about the chain of custody here.
we'll use this particular instance where evidence is collected at a scene, it's memorialized in place, placed in, if it's the right shape and the right condition, in a paper bag with some notes placed on the outside of the bag, transported to our office where it's secure.
Wait. It's placed into a collection item, a collection piece, and then put into a proper paper bag.
Red Solo Cup, I fill you up.
Sorry, I can't help it.
Stored either in a temporary locker or the permanent evidence area.
And as far as when it's taken into custody and put into a bag, what is sort of the protocol or the policies with regard to how that bag is marked or what is done with that bag once you have the item contained there?
There's certain piece of information that will typically go in the bag, the name of the person who is picking the evidence up, put in the bag, the date, time, location, a brief description of the evidence contained in the bag. And it will then be taped, and initials will be placed on the tape to memorialize who did the taping and the date in which the taping occurred.
And as far as the supervisor, as far as evidence is concerned, you mentioned that there are some evidence officers who are assistants to you as the actual evidence officer.
Yes.
And at this time, in January 29, 2022, who were those evidence officers within your unit?
Relative to the homicide section, it was Trooper Jeff Kotkowski and Trooper David DeChico.
Now, with respect to the evidence storage at your office, can you explain to the jury sort of how that's managed, where it is, and how items are checked in to evidence once they're sent?
We have an evidence tracking system. So as evidence comes in, we place it into the system. A label will be created and placed on the outside with the case number and an item number specific to that bag. It will be placed into the evidence room, which is locked in two different methods and has an alarm code pad, and you need your ID pass to swipe in order to enter. And only certain members of the unit have access and know the code to the alarm. Me obviously being the one, and the two assistant evidence officers. And that's subject to inspection by the state police frequently.
And so, correct me if I'm wrong, but at this time, it's essentially yourself, Trooper DeChico, Trooper Kotkowski, who had access to that evidence storage area.
Yes.
Now, with respect to the remainder of the troopers within your unit, would they have access to that same evidence storage area?
No.
Now, with respect to your unit at this time, late January of 2022, how many troopers were in your unit or under your supervision in the detective unit at that time?
There were 13 under my supervision for the unit as a whole. Specific to the homicide section, there were 4 troopers and 1 sergeant.
And that number, as far as 4 troopers and 1 sergeant, is that sort of a typical number, a low number, high number?
Historically for Norfolk, that was a low number. We have since had more transfers come into the unit.
And how many do you supervise within the homicide unit at this point?
1 sergeant and 7 troopers.
Now, with respect to the evidence storage area, is there sort of a temporary versus a permanent storage area contained within that locked and coded storage area?
Yes.
And can you describe sort of the difference between the two and how things are managed by either you or your assistants with regard to evidence within the locked storage area?
So because only essentially 3 people have access to the permanent storage area, if a member collects evidence and brings it back to the office and does not have access to the main storage area, we have another temporary storage area that is allowed by policy where they can then secure the evidence. The next available time, the person who has access to the main room will come in and transport that piece of evidence from the temporary area to the permanent area.
As far as that transportation or transmission from the temporary area to the permanent area, what, if any, sort of documentation is generated in regard into that?
There's no notation from one location to the other as allowed by policy.
And as far as when items are seized and when their labels are sort of printed in relation to those items, is that always done sort of simultaneously when the item comes in, or how is that typically done timing?
Well, same with the label printing system. So only the evidence officers have the ability to create the labels and put it into the system. So you need them to create the label. So if a member comes in, doesn't have access to that system, place it in temporary storage area at the next available opportunity for an evidence officer or the assistant evidence officer to arrive, know that there's evidence there and process it, place a label on it, and stick it in the permanent storage area.
Now, with respect to those items that you recovered from 34 Fairview Road at the roadway in front of it, where were those items located with respect to each other?
They were in total within a 5-foot area. So if you're looking at the house from right to left was how they were found. First was that first picture you displayed, which was the red piece of plastic. About 3 feet from that was the Nike sneaker. About 1 or 2 feet to the left of that was the clear plastic, and just next to that was another piece of red plastic along the curb of the road.
And as far as those items that were recovered in bag and placed in evidence on January 29th, did you have occasion to bring those items with you to court today?
Yes.
And Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Sir, I am presenting you the bag.
my own.
He just brings his own evidence gloves. That's interesting.
Lieutenant, first, just with reference to the item I placed before you, do you recognize that?
Yes,
And what do you recognize that to be?
the bag that contains the left sneaker that was seized from 34 Fairview Road that day, outside the residence.
So we got the left sneaker in.
And, Your Honor, with the court's permission, may the witness remove that item from the bag and display it for the jury.
Yes.
This will probably put to rest segregate. Maybe. I think it already got put to rest. For completion, it's good to have it in the courtroom. Otherwise, we might start asking some questions about that or.
Thank you, sir. If you could place that in the bag. Your Honor, the Commonwealth will seek to introduce in the minutes the next exhibit.
Exhibit 569.
Yeah, approach again, Your Honor.
Yes.
Leave those without being finished.
Okay, more bags.
Do you recognize each of those respective bags, sir?
Yes,
What do you recognize those to be?
the bags that contain the red and clear plastic pieces that were recovered from the roadway in front of 34 Fairview Road.
And, sir, if you could, just with respect to each of those bags, read what is listed as a description on the outside of the bag to the jury.
The description on this first one is pieces of clear hard plastic tail light cover. Location 34 Fairview Road, Canton.
And the second, please.
The description is pieces of red hard plastic tail light cover. Location 34 Fairview Road, Canton.
And, Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would ask that the witness be allowed to open each of those bags and display the items to the jury.
Okay.
And, sir, if I could ask you to start with the red plastic.
Okay.
We might be wrapping this up in like a minute or so. Sorry. About 5 minutes, I think.
The Commonwealth will seek to introduce and admit those as the next exhibit.
All right, Mr. Jackson, they're coming in.
No objection. Thank you.
570.
January 29, 2022. About what time is it that you arrive in the area of 34 Fairview?
About 5:30.
And had yourself or any members of your unit, to your knowledge, been at 34 Fairview at any point in time prior to your arrival there that day?
No.
Objection.
No, I'll allow it as to whether he knows whether they were. No.
And about how long was it that you were on scene at 34 Fairview that day?
About an hour.
Now, with respect to when these items were found, do you know approximately what time the first item was located by a member of the search team?
Yes.
And what time was that?
5:45.
Now, with respect to at any point in time that you were on scene at 34 Fairview Road on January 29th, 2022, was either Trooper Proctor or Sergeant Mechanic on scene at 34 Fairview while you were there?
No.
And with respect to around that time, as their supervisor, were you aware of where they were or their location at that time?
Yes.
And where was that?
They were following a tow truck that was towing Miss Reed's vehicle from Dighton to Canton.
Now, with respect to the vehicle and/or the pieces of red and clear plastic that were found by the CERT team at 34 Fairview Road on January 29th, what, if any, conversation did you have with respect to Lieutenant O'Hara in regard to the vehicle and sort of the damage on it?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
We wanted to know what we were looking for. Specifically, Lieutenant O'Hara wanted to know what are we looking for and what's the scope of the items we're looking for. So we had discussion about how much taillight we believed was missing from Miss Reed's vehicle, so that as we go along, we would know if we had it enough or we had it all, I should say.
And so with respect to that, what, if anything, were you able to share with Lieutenant O'Hara with respect to Ms. Reed's vehicle at that particular time?
I didn't have much information because it was still on a tow truck or being loaded up into the Canton Police Department at that time. So I didn't have any actual knowledge of how much taillight we're looking for.
And prior to you leaving from the scene at 34 Fairview Road, along with the CERT team on that date of January 29th, even at that time, did you know the full extent or how much taillight you were looking for at that time?
No.
Now, sir, if I could ask you just to, with the court's permission, Your Honor, may he remove the items from that second
Yes.
bag of warrant? Lieutenant, from the two items that you have before you in your hand, you had met reference to one of those clear pieces having some sort of stippling or raised surfaces on it. Is that correct?
Yes.
And if you could just with your finger or just in some way delineate to the jury where you observe that to be.
So you can see it as you look through it. You can see almost bubbling of it. And as you run your finger along, you can feel indentations along there, as well as the ridges that are along the top end here that appear on both pieces.
This is thrilling to get
Lieutenant,
more
if
of
you
these
could,
pieces.
place those items back in the bag. And Your Honor, Commonwealth will seek to introduce them as the next exhibit.
No objection.
Exhibit 571.
Your Honor, given the time and given where I
Why
am.
don't you come to side? I would say this.
Sidebar. They're probably going to continue tomorrow. Let's see here.
Keep research or
Oops,
investigate.
sorry. Okay. Yep, I think we're
Rather than while we keep talking, I'm going to go ahead and send you home. Please do not discuss this case with anyone. Don't do any independent research or investigation into the case. If you happen to see, hear, read anything about the case, please let us know. We'll see you tomorrow. So tomorrow will be 9 to 4, 9 to 4:30. And we hope to get started right away, okay? Detective Lieutenant, I'm just going to ask you to file out after the jury.
Yes, sir.
tomorrow's another full day,
All right, jury out. Jury's called.
either from 9 to 4 or 9 to 4:30. All right, let's see if there's going to be anything between the judge and the attorneys or maybe a sidebar. Yeah, sidebar. So we'll just see if there's anything after this. We're going back to the desk. It seems she is going to be leaving the courtroom. And we've got the fan. Okay, so that is officially it for the day. Let's get some questions. Let's get this this poll right here. I'll give you guys just a couple more minutes in case you have not voted in the poll. So far, we've got 1,194 votes in this. I'll get it. I'll get it in just a minute, and then we will. If I start to sign off, someone let me know. And I haven't done the poll yet. Someone let me know. Tori Matthews, yes.
It's been 84 years.
This trial has absolutely been 84 years. I wasn't even born yet when we started this trial. I'll probably be a mother by the time we finish this trial. Okay, let's get some questions here. Jonathan Willard question, how is Lally, even at 1.25x speed, still so slow and boring? Is it a tactic to just be so boring? I feel like a little emotion out of the DA to combat AJ and DY's overly emotional crosses. And the thing is, the DA's office is also able to use righteous indignation because they are supposed to be bringing this case on behalf of the community, right? When someone has died, they are the ones that are supposed to be seeking justice. And so his demeanor this entire time has very much felt like he's been put on to put this trial on, that he doesn't necessarily believe in his case. I've never once been convinced of that. So from the get-go, right from day one, right from opening statements, I've never been convinced of it. The way he'll start to ask a question and then sigh in between and then finish the rest of his question. First off, it doesn't help with people trying to pay attention. But on the second part of that, is the fact that it really feels like he's just exhausted by bringing this case rather than jazzed, rather than excited, because he really believes in his case and he really thinks that his side should win. You definitely get that very clearly from the defense. They are absolutely completely lit on fire about their client being not guilty and being improperly prosecuted here. That's the vibe that you get from the defense. Absolutely, is that they believe in their client 100%. Technique. Legalbytes. Carrie Roberts said she could see a body-shaped mound right after she stopped the car before KR got there. Well, KR was in the same car with them. So the three of them were in the car when they got to 34 Fairview Road. And what Carrie Roberts actually had testified is that Karen Reed said, there he is, there he is, there he is. And Carrie Roberts did testify that there was like a body-shaped mound or a body-sized mound of snow. That was how she described it. So, so, I mean, it could be, I mean, it also could be that Karen Reed would have reacted that way to any sort of mound that looked like that in any kind of a different location. Because she was saying so many things that were disconnected from reality, that her behavior was indicative of someone who had lost her mind. There were so many things about that. But yes, Carrie did testify about seeing the body shaped mound right at that moment too. Sue B, question. I just saw a video that compared the sneaker in the snow and the one found on JO. The soles are different colors. Anyone else catch that? There was a lot on Twitter about this, but I think that the photos that were being shown that were passing this idea around that they were two different shoes because one had a black sole, one had a white sole. It was because of the shadowing in the photos. They were not the best photos taken. They should have taken one from multiple angles so that you can clearly see the sole as well. But they didn't. I remember when I went back and looked at all of the photos of the shoe, there were some that can show a little bit of the white on the sole. So I'm not convinced by this theory that those are two different shoes. Dr. Who 8675309. Why did it take until now to bring up the fact that it was snowing? I don't know why it took him a little bit longer in this direct examination. Tori Matthews, question. What if any jurors is Lally trying to lull to sleep with redundant questions? He's trying to make them believe Proctor's testimony was a bad dream. Could be. Throw in someone else that can testify in a boring way about police work. Try to make them forget it. I don't know that they're going to forget it though. I wouldn't. Jerry Roth. Legalbytes. I thought the judge didn't like it when the jury's time is wasted, or is that only for the defense? Yeah, she did say that. She said that anyway. James Games Classics. Legalbytes. Has the prosecution presented a credible theory as to how in SUV reversing could cause JOC facial injuries and head injuries only? Are they saying he was bending down when hit? IDK, WTF? They haven't said about anything about his positioning. Here's the thing about that. We have not yet heard from the medical examiner, but we now have some questions about the medical examiner's conclusions. And we do know at this point that the medical examiner did ultimately conclude that it was an undetermined death. The manner of death was undetermined, meaning they could not say that it was a homicide at the hands of someone else. It wasn't him unaliving himself, or at least the medical examiner couldn't say whether or not he had unalived himself or he died at the hands of someone else or it was an accident. This is the medical examiner, of course, is going to be testifying all about this, but at some point, well, maybe not, of course. I shouldn't say of course. You would think that the medical examiner will, in fact, be testifying at some point about it. But so far, we don't have a theory as to how those injuries presented themselves only from the neck up and his right arm. Catastrophe Kate, Legalbytes, I feel like he might testify to phone stuff because that's what his specialty. Fair enough. Elena, question. Is Lally trying to numb the jurors' brains from boredom so they'll forget the previous witness? I think that might be part of it. That might be part of it. Hussar 1683. Legalbytes question. I was too young for the OJ trial, but did Proctor discredit himself worse than Mark Furman? I can't speak to the OJ trial. I also was quite young during that trial. I do know that Mark Furman kind of blew up the case in that trial because he used the N-word. I do know that. I don't know the extent of and the context in which it came up and how it was presented in court. So I don't know if this is worse or not, but this is very bad. I will say that was bad. This is also very, very bad. And I think that this is likely to have a lot of repercussions. All right, Kayla Myers, thank you so much for becoming a YouTube member. Welcome to Bite Club. Very happy to have you here as well, or welcome back to Bite Club, I should say. Looks like you're at croissant level. So very, very happy to have you here. Thank you so much for supporting the channel, helping us to keep those lights on and dedicate resources towards this channel. All the researching and writing and filming and editing and all that good stuff. I really, really appreciate all of that. Normally on Fridays, we've got members only live streams at 10 a.m. East Coast time. This week, there is trial going on. So in that kind of a case, I also normally will push it to Saturday. This time, however, Friday, Saturday, on both of those days, I am flying. So I will not be able to stream on Friday for the trial or for members only. Same thing on Saturday. So I'm going to probably have to make up for it on the following weekend for the members only live stream. So, all right, folks. Oh, here's another question here. Divine and Hale with Donna Clifford. Question. Do you have TENS machine? It'll help your back. Oh, no, like a TENS unit? No, I don't. But my back is actually okay. It's a lot better, especially in this chair than the chair that I was in for the last few streams. That was getting a little bit rough, I've got to say. But we've got today, tomorrow streaming here. Next week, I'm going to be back in my brand new ergonomic chair that was a result of a sponsorship, which was great. So that one is going to be even better. So things are looking up for my back here for these streams. Okay, but thank you so much. And also, yeah, I think that's it. So I think that's all the questions that we've got. Thank you, folks, for joining us today. I know we went a little bit longer than the stream itself did. We got a little bit behind because of Jackson's fiery cross that we can't even 1.25x, right? But there was a lot of commentary. There was a lot that needed to be said, in my opinion, anyway. So if you haven't done so already, please do like the stream, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more stuff. If you would like to support the channel, there are links in the description below, or actually you can join, I think, directly from the chat, but there also are links in the description to Patreon if you would prefer to be a supporter on Patreon. We've also got meme merch. So if there is stuff that you would like to see, I've got to expand that to t-shirts and stuff like that, but we've got glasses, we've got mugs, we've got all kinds of stuff. And thank you so much, guys, for the poll reminder. Ending the poll right now. Okay. What are the results? So 1,300 votes halfway through day 23. How do you lean regarding KR's murder charge? 87% said not guilty. 7% said need more information. 4% said guilty. So there's fewer votes in this one than in the previous one by about 700. So, but we've got those numbers definitely did shift upwards towards not guilty overall after Trooper Proctor's testimony. Definitely. Doctor Who 8675309, can we get a poll tomorrow to determine if it was snowing or not? Sure. Why not? And also, yes, for the schedule. We are back on tomorrow. Tomorrow is a full day of testimony. So same time, same place. Come on right back. In the meantime, day 22 recap was up as of this morning. Going to get working on day 23 recap as soon as possible. So that would be hopefully getting out before tomorrow starts and everything. We'll see how quickly we can get this one out. Definitely trying to get those out faster to you guys before the next trial day starts, so that folks can actually review and whatnot. And I know that there are some folks out there that are also relying on those recaps. So we want to make sure that we are getting those out as soon as possible, while also maintaining some good quality for it as well. And I think that's about it. Thanks again to the mods, as always, for helping to make sure that this is a great community where folks can come in and bring their thoughts and do so in a way that is comfortable and amicable, and folks can even agree and disagree and do so in a way that is respectful. I love it. I love it so much. So, okay. All right. I think that's about it. Okay, guys. That for me about does it. That's day 23 wrapped up. Okay. All right. I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya.